My dear friend, if you are listening to the sound of my voice, then you have found your way to my story. I need you to get comfortable, to truly listen. Because for 40 years, I lived a life that I believed was true. I built a home, a family, a legacy, all on a foundation I thought was solid as stone. I never imagined it was built on sand. And I never, ever dreamed that a simple act of cleaning my husband's car would lead me to a small, innocuous tube. A discovery that would unravel my entire world and set me on a path of quiet, calculated revenge. My name is Eloise, and this is the story of how I lost everything, only to find myself. The silence in our house had become a third presence. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a heavy, watchful one. My husband, Arthur, had just returned from another business dinner. He didn't just look tired. He looked emptied. He offered me a thin, weary smile, tossed his tailored jacket over the arm of the sofa, a habit I'd asked him to break for 4 decades, and mumbled something about a difficult client from out of town. I watched him climb the stairs, his footsteps a familiar, heavy rhythm on the wooden steps. He didn't kiss my forehead. He didn't ask about the bakery, the one I'd built from nothing. He simply disappeared into our bedroom. A few moments later, I heard the bed groan under his weight, and then the soft rhythmic sound of his snoring. The performance was over for the night, but something in the air had shifted. It was subtle, like a single wrong note in a familiar song. I stood alone in the living room, surrounded by the artifacts of our shared life. The silver-framed wedding photo on the mantelpiece, our faces young and blazing with hope. The slightly crooked clay vase our son Benjamin made in 1st grade. The Persian rug we haggled for joyfully in a Marrakech market. It all felt like a museum exhibit now. A beautiful display of a life that had somehow, secretly, ceased to exist. I began my nightly ritual, the dance of the dutiful wife. I picked up his jacket to hang it properly, and that's when I caught it, a faint but unmistakable scent. A sweet, cloying floral perfume, something with jasmine and vanilla, clinging to the wool collar. It was alien. It didn't belong in the scentscape of our life, which was built on the smells of baking bread, of Arthur's sandalwood cologne, of home. My heart, that foolish, hopeful organ, gave a painful, terrified lurch. I dismissed it. A restaurant, I told myself. A crowded room, a passing fancy. Then I saw his phone. He'd left it on the coffee table, a sleek black rectangle with its screen still glowing. A tiny, accusatory beacon in the dim room. Arthur was a technophobe. He loathed email, calling it a soulless chore. He preferred the human connection of a phone call. He called this device his expensive paperweight, but there, illuminated on the screen, was a new email notification. A cold finger of pure dread traced a path down my spine. I picked it up. My hands, which had kneaded 10,000 batches of dough without a tremble, were shaking. I tapped the screen. The message loaded. It was brief, just a single line of text, but it struck me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. "You were incredible tonight, Dad." And below it, a single blazing red heart emoji. The word Dad seemed to pulse on the screen, searing itself into my vision. Dad. Who was calling him Dad? Benjamin was our only son. The room tilted. I clutched the phone, my breath caught in a vice in my throat. I scrolled frantically, desperate for a name, a sender, a context, anything to explain this away. But there was nothing, just that anonymous, jumbled email address and those 5 devastating words. I placed the phone back exactly as I found it, my mind reeling, a tornado of denial and fear. I felt like a ghost in my own home. I continued my cleaning, my movements robotic, my mind 1,000 miles away. As I gathered his trousers for the laundry, my fingers brushed against a folded slip of paper in his pocket. I pulled it out, my hands now ice cold. It was a receipt from the Gilded Knife, a famously intimate, exorbitantly expensive steakhouse in Carmel, dated tonight. Carmel. He had told me he was in San Jose. He'd even complained in vivid detail about the traffic on the 101. The receipt was for a party of 2. 2 ribeye steaks, a bottle of 2005 Bordeaux. The same vintage, the very same year. We had opened the second. location of Eloise's hearth, a year of struggle and triumph, a memory I held sacred. Now it felt contaminated. I stood there in the quiet kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly a roaring in my ears. The evidence was circumstantial, yes, but my intuition, that deep, primal, wordless knowledge of a wife who has shared a bed, a home, and a lifetime for 4 decades, was screaming. This was not a coincidence. This was a pattern, a fracture line running through the very foundation of my world. I had to know. The not knowing was a torture far worse than any truth. I grabbed my own phone from my apron pocket, with a sense of profound shame, as if I were the one committing the crime. I took a clear picture of the receipt. I crept back to the coffee table, my heart pounding a frantic, guilty rhythm against my ribs, and took a picture of the damning email. I was violating his privacy, but a colder, sharper emotion was taking hold, a desperate, vital need for the truth, no matter how ugly. The garage was my final stop that night. The air was chill and smelled of gasoline and damp concrete. Arthur's sleek sedan sat silently, a dormant beast. I opened the passenger door and slid inside. The interior still held the faint, lingering trace of that same sickly sweet perfume. My stomach churned. With a deep breath, I opened the glove compartment. It was a jumble of his life, old insurance papers, a pack of peppermint gum, a pair of sunglasses. And there, tucked neatly beside the car manual, was a small, unassuming tube. I pulled it out. It wasn't lip balm. It was a tube of personal lubricant, half-used, with a tiny, telltale bit of residue around the cap. The world seemed to stop on its axis. The familiar sounds of the house, the distant tick of the clock, everything just ceased. Arthur and I, our intimate life had faded years ago. It was a mutual, unspoken understanding, or so I had believed. A natural quieting, a slowing down with age. He was always too tired, too stressed, his mind on business. I had accepted it. I had believed him. I had mourned that part of our life and moved on, focusing on our friendship, our partnership, our family. But this tube, cold and plastic in my hand, told a different story. A brutal, humiliating, undeniable story. He had energy. He had passion. It just wasn't for me. I held it, this small object that felt heavier than a sack of flour. It was the proof, the final, ugly piece of the puzzle that I never wanted to solve. I took a picture of it, my hands shaking so violently the image was almost blurred. Then, with meticulous care, I placed it back in the exact same position, at the same angle. I closed the glove box, closed the car door, and walked back into the house, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. The man sleeping soundly in our bed, in the room we had shared for 40 years, was a complete and total stranger. The next morning, the sun rose as if it were any other day, painting the kitchen in a warm, golden light that felt like a mockery. Arthur came down, dressed for work, his face a perfect mask of casual normalcy. He came up behind me as I stood at the stove, frying eggs, and kissed the top of my head. Big day today? Ellie, need to head back to San Jose. Another round with the investors. Don't wait up for me. I forced a smile, the muscles in my face aching with the strain of the performance. Of course, dear. Drive safely. I watched his car disappear down the tree-lined street. My heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. The moment he was gone, I moved. I called my dearest friend, Beatrice. My voice was a strained, thin whisper as I haltingly explained the email. The receipt, the perfume. Oh, my dear Eleanor, she sighed. And there was a universe of pity and anger in those 3 words. She gave me a number. His name is Mr. Sterling. He's discreet and he's the best. I met Mr. Sterling in the hushed silence of a historical archive room at the city library, not a public cafe. He was a small, neat man with the kind of eyes that missed nothing. I handed him the flash drive, my hand trembling. I believe my husband is having an affair, I said, the words tasting like bitter ash. I need to know the truth, all of it. He nodded, his expression grave and devoid of judgment. I understand, Mrs. Whitaker. I will begin surveillance immediately. My advice is to go about your life as you normally would. Do not confront him. Do not change your behavior. The truth has a way of revealing itself, often in the most unexpected of places. I will be in touch. I went to my bakery, the hearth, the familiar, comforting sense of yeast, sugar, and baking bread usually felt like a warm embrace. Today they felt foreign, the warmth a lie. I needed dough, I piped buttercream roses. I smiled and chatted with my regular customers, all while feeling like I was watching a film of someone else's life. I was an actor, playing the part of Eloise Whitaker, the contented baker, the devoted, trusting wife. The first message from Mr. Sterling came 2 days later. It was a photograph, crystal clear, taken from a discreet distance across a rain-slicked street. Arthur was standing under the elegant awning of the Seafoam Hotel, a boutique, place known for its discretion. He wasn't in San Jose, but it wasn't the location that stole the very air from my lungs. It was the woman beside him, her hand tucked intimately into the crook of his arm, her body angled towards his as if drawn by a magnet. It was Clara, my daughter-in-law, Benjamin's wife. The world dissolved into a dizzying, nauseating swirl of color and sound. Clara, the bright, beautiful girl my son had brought home, beaming with pride. The woman I had welcomed into our family with open arms, teaching her our family recipes, sharing stories of Benjamin's childhood. The mother of my precious granddaughter, Lily. She was wearing a sophisticated deep blue dress, one I had never seen before. She was laughing, her head thrown back in genuine delight. And Arthur was looking down at her with an expression of such naked, tender adoration it was a physical pain to behold. It was a look from our youth, a look I had not seen directed at me in over 20 years. He had given it to her. I swiped to the next photo, my vision blurring with unshed tears. They were inside the hotel's restaurant now, at a small, secluded table lit by a single candle. Their heads were close together, whispering. Their world condensed to that tiny circle of light. In another, his hand was covering hers on the white tablecloth, his thumb stroking her knuckles. The intimacy was a violation. It was so deep, so familiar. This was not a new, furtive fling. This was a relationship with history, with roots. Mr. Sterling had included a short video. The quality was unnervingly clear. I fumbled for my earbuds, my hands clumsy. The video showed Clara reaching out across the table and gently, so gently, brushing a stray crumb from the corner of Arthur's lip. Her touch lingered. He caught her hand, brought it to his lips, and kissed her fingertips. The gesture was so effortless, so full of unthinking affection, it stole my breath. This was their language. This was their normal. I stumbled into the back room of the bakery, the heart of the hearth, and leaned my forehead against the cool, flour-dusted wall, gasping for air. The betrayal was a two-headed monster, each head more vicious than the last. My husband, my daughter-in-law, they had not only betrayed me, they had betrayed my son. They had betrayed our entire family, our history, our future. They had made a mockery of every holiday, every birthday, every shared smile. The following days were a hazy dreamscape of grief and a simmering, terrifying rage. Mr. Sterling was a ghost, a silent, efficient collector of truth. The evidence piled up in a digital folder I named tax documents on my computer, photos of them leaving a lawyer's office in the financial district, both looking serious and focused, a video of them shopping at an exclusive jeweler, Arthur fastening a delicate diamond necklace around Clara's throat, her face glowing in the mirror. They were bold, reckless. They believed I was a fool, a blind, trusting old woman, too wrapped up in her flour and sugar to see the world crumbling around her. The final, most devastating piece of the puzzle arrived not as a photo, but as an audio file. Mr. Sterling, with a skill that both impressed and horrified me, had managed to capture a conversation from their usual hotel room. I waited until I was completely alone, the bakery dark and silent, to listen. I pressed play, my blood turning to ice in my veins. It's just a matter of time now. My love? Arthur's voice was calm, confident. The voice he used when discussing a surefire business deal. The paperwork is almost ready. Once we transfer the bakery's assets and the property into the new holding company, it will be legally ours. She won't see it coming. She trusts me implicitly with all the financials. Clara's laugh was light, musical, a sound I had once found delightful. I can't wait to be rid of the smell of that place. All that sugar and yeast. But it's a gold mine, Arthur. And this house, we can sell it and buy a beautiful modern penthouse downtown. Just for us. A fresh start. Benjamin will be taken care of. Of course, Arthur said, his tone suddenly dismissive, as if discussing a minor shareholder. A generous settlement. But the business, the property, it should have been mine all along. I supported her through all of it. I built that life for her. Now I'm taking it back for us. For our future. I sat there in the profound dark of the bakery, the audio echoing in my ears, each word a shard of glass in my heart. It wasn't just an affair. It was a conspiracy, a cold, calculated corporate takeover of my life. They weren't just lovers. They were partners in crime, plotting to systematically steal everything I had spent my life building with my own 2 hands. My bakery, my legacy, the very roof over my head. They were going to leave me, the woman who had given Arthur 40 years, who had loved Clara as a daughter, penniless, homeless and utterly alone. A strange, cold clarity settled over me. The initial paralyzing grief was still there. A vast dark ocean inside me, but now a steely, unbreakable resolve rose to the surface like a leviathan. I would not be their victim. I would not be the fool they took me for. The quiet, gentle Eloise was gone. In her place was someone new, someone who would fight back. The plan began to form in my mind, not as a burst of hysterical anger, but as a slow, meticulous recipe. A recipe for a revenge that was as cold and calculated as their betrayal. I would use their own secrets, their own lies, as the ingredients. I knew their patterns. Arthur told me he had another business trip coming up. I saw the barely concealed spark of excitement in his eyes when I mentioned, quite casually, that I had to go to a major bakery convention in Napa for a full night. It was the perfect, unsuspicious opportunity for them. The night before I was supposed to leave, I waited until Arthur was in a deep, wine-induced sleep, his snores a steady rhythm in the dark. I slipped out of bed, took his car keys from the nightstand, and went to the garage. The fluorescent light flickered on, illuminating his sedan. I opened the glove compartment. The tube was still there, a silent accusation. I took it into the house. In the bright, clinical light of the kitchen, I looked at it, the symbol of their duplicity. Then I opened the drawer where I kept my tools and supplies and took out a fresh tube of industrial strength, clear-drying superglue, the kind I used to repair broken chair legs and shelving units. With the steady, precise hands of a master baker who measures everything to the gram, I carefully emptied the lubricant into the sink and thoroughly rinsed the tube. Then I filled it to the same level with the thick, viscous glue. I wiped the nozzle clean. It was a perfect replica, identical. I placed it back in the glove compartment, in the exact same spot, at the exact same angle. My heart was eerily calm. This was just the first ingredient, the binding agent. The next part of the plan was more complex. I purchased a small voice-activated digital recorder. While Arthur was at his office, I hid it in our bedroom, carefully concealing it behind a row of books on the shelf, just beside the headboard of our bed, ensuring it had a clear line of sight, or rather, sound, to the entire room. The ultimate betrayal would be recorded in the very heart of our marital home. The next morning, I played my part to perfection. I packed a small overnight bag, made a show of checking my train times, and gave Arthur a light wifely peck on the cheek. "I'll see you tomorrow evening," I said, my voice bright. "Wish me luck with the suppliers. I'm sure you'll charm them all." "Ellie," he said, his smile wide and genuine, his eyes sparkling with an excitement that had nothing to do with my success and everything to do with my absence. He couldn't wait for me to be gone. I did not go to Napa. I drove to Beatrice's house, which, by a cruel twist of fate, had a perfect, unobstructed view of my own home's front door and driveway. I set up a camera with a powerful zoom lens on a tripod by her window, and I waited. My vigil began. Right on time, as predictable as the tide, a taxi pulled up. Clara emerged, not in a coat, but in a delicate silk kimono-style robe, tied loosely over her clothes. She carried a small overnight bag. She practically floated to my front door, a secret, triumphant smile on her face. Arthur opened it before she could even knock, pulled her inside with a hungry urgency, and the heavy oak door swung shut, locking them in their secret world. My hands were perfectly steady. I felt a strange, detached peace, the calm at the eye of the hurricane. I opened the companion app on my phone, the one linked to the hidden recorder in my bedroom. I put in a single earbud. Their voices filtered through, tinny but clear. Laughter. The clink of champagne flutes. He'd bought champagne for her in my home. The sound of music, something soft and jazzy that Arthur never listened to with me. Then the familiar, haunting creak of our bed. The bed where I had slept beside him for 40 years. The bed where we had conceived our son. I waited. The timing, like in baking, was everything. Then I heard it. A sharp, panicked cry from Clara, cutting through the romantic music. "Arthur, what is this?" I can't move!" His voice initially confused, then rising in frantic alarm. "What? What are you talking about? Stop struggling." "Oh my God, it's like cement. It's glue." That was my cue. The mixture had set. I tapped a preset button on my phone. Earlier that day, I had rigged a simple but effective smoke device in my kitchen, a heavy-bottomed pan filled with oil, placed on a burner connected to a smart plug. With my tap, the plug activated. The burner glowed red, and the oil began to heat rapidly, soon sending thick, black, acrid smoke pouring into the kitchen. I had also subtly tampered with the fire alarm system, adjusting the sensitivity of the sensor in the kitchen hallway to be hyper-reactive. The ear-splitting, relentless shriek of the alarm immediately filled the house, a sound of pure panic. Through my camera lens, I saw lights flick on in my neighbors' homes up and down the street. Curtains were pulled back, faces appeared at windows. But the masterpiece, the final public unveiling, was yet to come. I had, from a blocked number, anonymously tipped off the local news channel about a possible major structural fire at the prestigious Whitaker residence, and I had, with a heart fractured into a million pieces, made the most difficult call of my life. I called my son. "Benjamin," I said, my voice choked with real gut-wrenching tears. "It's the house. The fire alarm is shrieking and no one is answering the phone. I'm on the train to Napa. I'm helpless. Please, can you go? I'm so scared." I watched, my own tears now flowing freely, as fire trucks, led by Benjamin's own engine company, screeched to a dramatic halt in front of the house, their red and white lights painting the quiet street in pulses of emergency. I saw my son, my beautiful, brave boy, jump down from the cab, his face a mask of professional determination and personal fear for his childhood home. He shouted orders to his crew, grabbed a heavy Halligan tool, and with a powerful, focused heave, splintered the lock and smashed my own beautiful, hand-carved front door inwards. He rushed inside, his team following with axes and a hose line. I switched my audio back on. The sounds were a chaotic symphony, the relentless, brain-jarring blare of the alarm, Benjamin's shouts echoing through the halls. "Dad, Clara! Is anyone in here? Call out!" Then a dead, profound silence, a void of sound that seemed to suck all the air out of the world. It was broken by Benjamin's voice, but it was a voice I didn't recognize, broken, shattered, disbelieving. What is this? What are you doing?" I could picture the scene with painful, vivid clarity. My son, standing frozen in the doorway of his parents' bedroom, his firefighter's helmet in his hand, finding his father and his wife, naked, locked together in an absurd, humiliating, and permanent-looking embrace, trapped by the industrial-strength superglue. The scene of their secret passion, now a tableau of their public shame. The subsequent moments were a blur of shocked noise and utter humiliation. The gasps and muttered exclamations of the other firefighters. The frantic, clumsy attempts to drape them with sheets, to preserve some shred of decency. The struggle to maneuver the gurneys through the doorway with their conjoined passengers. The crowd of neighbors on the lawn, their phones held high like torches, capturing every second of the spectacle for social media. The local news van, arriving with perfect damning timing, its camera lights flooding. The scene as the two stretchers were carried out into the cool night air, the sheets doing little to hide the nature of their predicament. The video, of course, went viral within the hour. Prominent local, businessman and daughter-in-law in bizarre glue, trap scandal. The headlines wrote themselves. I returned home the next day, playing the part of the grieving, bewildered, humiliated wife to perfection. I visited them in the hospital. They had been surgically separated, but their skin was raw, red, and burned. The doctors were puzzled, attributing it to a severe chemical reaction to the adhesive. They didn't know that I had later swapped their prescribed medical ointment for a potent, homemade capsaicin cream. The screams of agony that echoed, from their hospital room as it was, applied were the final, satisfying notes in my symphony of revenge, a pain that mirrored my own. I stood by Benjamin's side, my arm around his trembling shoulders, as he filed for divorce from Clara. I stood by his side in my lawyer's office as we confronted a broken Arthur with the entire mountain of evidence, the photos, the videos, the audio recording of them coldly plotting to steal my life's work. Arthur signed the divorce papers without a word of protest. His reputation, his fortune, and his so-called love in utter ruins. He and Clara disappeared from our city and from our lives shortly after. They are ghosts to us now. It has been a year now. Benjamin and I run the hearth together. The silence in my new, smaller home is no longer heavy or watchful. It is peaceful. It is my own. It is filled with the sounds I choose, the radio, the pages of a book turning, the quiet hum of my own contentment. My son still carries the pain, a deep, sorrowful shadow in his eyes that may never fully leave. We talk about it sometimes in the quiet, honest hours after we've closed the shop and wiped down the counters. We are healing together. We are learning to trust again, leaning on each other. They thought they could take everything from me. But they were wrong. In their betrayal, they showed me a strength I never knew I possessed. They taught me that even the gentlest heart, when pushed to the brink, can house a formidable and righteous storm. They took the woman I was, but they created the woman I am now. And I would not trade her for the world. So that is my story, my truth. If you are listening, from wherever you are, thank you. Thank you for bearing witness. Thank you for your time, your attention, your compassion. And please tell me, where in this wide, beautiful world are you? Let me know in the comments below. Your presence here, your listening ear, is a part of my healing. It reminds me that from the ashes of the greatest pain, new connections can grow, and that we are never, ever truly alone.